Hey everyone, before I jump in, let me give you a little context on where I'm coming from. I've been in tech for about 30 years now. Most of that time has been in software engineering and enterprise architecture. These days, I run my own consulting agency, Keysoft, where we help organizations figure out how to actually get value from AI through strong engineering and architecture practices. And I still write code. Every day, every week, I'm in the editor right alongside the teams I work with. So when I talk about what AI assisted development looks like day to day, I'm not speaking from the sidelines. I'm living it. And what I'm seeing across teams and organizations right now is something I think a lot of you are feeling too. So let me ask you something. Think about the last time you built a new service or built out a new feature from scratch. A couple of years ago, you'd open your editor, pull up a template maybe, and start writing. Line by line, you picked the patterns, you made the decisions, and you understood what you were building because you were the one building it. Now, you type a few sentences into a chat window, and something that looks like finished code shows up. Sometimes it's finished, it may complete the test, and it goes straight into a pull request. Done, you're on to your next ticket. That's just how we work now. AI assisted development isn't some pilot program anymore. It's real, and the speed is exciting. Your sprint charts, I bet they look amazing. I bet your leadership is happy, and everyone feels like it's working. But then a few weeks go by, and somebody on your team pulls up a file and goes, "Wait, what is this doing?" The code works, sure, it's running in production, but nobody fully gets why it works. The patterns don't match the rest of your code base, and there are assumptions baked in that nobody talked about because nobody wrote it, and AI did. And now that developer is spending their whole sprint untangling something that took 30 seconds to create. That's what I want to talk about today. AI changed how fast we write code, but it didn't change who's responsible for what ships. And that gap between speed and ownership, that's where things start to break. Some people call this vibe coding. I'm sure you've heard of that term. You describe what you want, the AI gives you something, you glance at it, it looks right, you ship it, the vibe is good, the code feels done. And for prototypes and quick experiments, that workflow typically works great. But when vibe coded output starts flowing into production systems, into shared code bases, into services that other teams depend on, that's when the cost shows up. Because something that feels done and something that is done are two totally different things. Now, I could spend the next 20 minutes walking through adoption stats and productivity studies, but you've probably heard a few of those already today. So let's skip ahead to the part that nobody's measuring yet. What all this speed is actually costing your team. We all know what technical debt is. You take a shortcut, you know you're taking it, and you tell yourself, we'll come back and clean this up. That's a trade off you made on purpose, and sometimes it's the right call. Quality debt, though, is a different thing. It sneaks in. It shows up when code enters your code base that works fine, passes your test, and looks totally reasonable on the surface, but it's carrying hidden gaps. The intent behind the code is fuzzy. The patterns don't match what your team normally does. Edge cases are handled in ways that seem fine until they blow up on a Wednesday night at 2 a.m. And I'm speaking from experience. When you write code by hand, you leave your fingerprints, your naming conventions, your comments. Even the way you structure your logic tells the next person something about what you are trying to solve. AI generated code doesn't have fingerprints. It gives you something that looks right. It gives you working syntax, but it doesn't give you context. And when you multiply that across your whole team, hundreds of PRs, thousands of lines of generated code every week, you end up with a code base that people stop trusting. Reviews take longer because there's more to double check. And those hidden assumptions, they start showing up as production incidents. That's quality debt. And most teams don't even have a way to see it yet. A simple way to think about it is technical debt is like putting something on a credit card on purpose. You know the bill is coming, but quality debt is like someone else using your credit card without telling you. The charges keep adding up and you don't even know until the statement arrives. Okay, let me walk you through something that might sound familiar. Your team started using AI coding tools about 6 months ago. Output went up. More PRs getting merged every sprint. You shared the numbers with the leadership, everyone high fived, and you moved on. But then a few things started to shift quietly. Code reviews started taking longer, not because your reviewers got worse at their jobs, but because there was way more to look at and way less context to go on. Developers started spending more time reading generated code than writing their own. And some of your best engineers started saying things like, I spent all day refactoring something we merged 2 weeks ago. That's the rework tax. It's the cost your team pays after the code ships, and it doesn't show up on any dashboard. Let me give you a specific example. Say your team generates a service integration with an AI tool. It works, it passed the test, it gets merged. 3 weeks later, though, someone on another team tries to build on top of that integration and discovers the generated code assumed a synchronous pattern that doesn't fit the rest of your system. Now you've got a refactor nobody planned for because that original task was already marked completed. Or picture this: a junior developer uses an AI tool to build an API endpoint. The code looks clean. It follows conventions from the model's training data, but it doesn't follow your team's conventions, your naming patterns, your error handling approach, your logging standards. None of that is there. So a senior engineer spends 2 hours in review walking through every single thing that's off. The PR goes through 3 rounds before it finally merges. This is happening everywhere right now, and I am speaking from experience. And do you want to know the frustrating part? Your regular metrics won't catch it. If you're tracking velocity by story points or PRs merge, you look more productive than you've ever been. That rework just gets absorbed into future sprints as unplanned work. So let me frame it this way. If your team is shipping 40% more code, but spending 60% more time on rework, where did the productivity go? If reviews are taking twice as long and you're refactoring code that's less than a month old, are you actually moving faster or are you just churning? That's the questions most teams haven't asked yet. I've had this conversation with engineering leaders who tell me my team has never been more productive. And then I ask about their defect rates on recently merged code or how many sprint points went to unplanned work last quarter. And the room gets quiet because those numbers tell a completely different story. The rework tax builds up quietly in review comments that keep getting longer, in stand ups where someone says, yeah, I'm still working through that integration from last sprint, in the senior engineer who quietly rewrites a generated module on a Friday afternoon because it's faster than explaining what's wrong with it. That's the tax, and your team is already paying it. So, what do the teams that are actually thriving with AI tools have in common? It's a few things, and they are simpler than you think. First, they treat every piece of AI output as a draft, every time. This sounds like a no brainer, But look at how most teams actually work. The AI spits out the code, it compiles, the developer skims it, maybe changes a variable name, and opens a PR. There's this unspoken assumption that generated code is closer to done than code you wrote yourself. Strong teams flip that. They treat generated code the way you treat a first draft from a brand new team member. It needs a real look, it needs context, and it needs to match how this specific team builds software. Second, they make intent visible. When someone on the team uses AI to generate code, they write down what they asked for, what they changed, and why. Not as busy work, because the next person who touches that code needs to understand the thinking behind it. And if that thinking only lives in the prompt that generated the code, it's gone the second the chat window closes. Third, they push quality checks way earlier in the process. This is the big one. If your quality gates are at the PR stage or later, you've already stacked up debt. The code is written, the developer has mentally moved on. The reviewer is now doing cleanup work that should have been caught before a commit ever happened. Strong teams use tools that give feedback right in the editor in real time, not just linting, pattern checks, naming conventions, consistency with the existing code base. Developers see the issue in seconds, not days later in a review comment. I worked with one team that did exactly this. They added automated quality checks that run on every file save. Their PR rejection rate dropped by half. And the part that surprised them, the developers actually liked it. They stopped getting blindsided by review feedback 3 days after they'd moved on to something else. The loop got shorter. The cost of fixing things went down and reviewers could actually focus on design and logic instead of chasing style and convention issues. That's what shifting quality left looks like. You catch problems when they're cheap to fix. Okay, so this is where I want to challenge how most of us are thinking about this. Because the metrics we've been using for years, they're starting to lie to us. Velocity has always been a go to signal. How much work is the team getting done per sprint? How fast are features moving through the pipeline? Now, those numbers still matter, but they're not enough anymore. When AI tools can generate code at machine speed, raw output stops being the bottleneck. The real question is whether that output holds up over time. So, what should you actually be tracking? Start with the rework rate. How often is code getting changed within 30 days of being merged? If a file gets modified, patched, or refactored shortly after it ships, that's a signal. It means the first version didn't meet the bar, even though it passed review. Track this for AI assisted code versus everything else, and patterns will jump out at you. Some teams find that generated code gets reworked 2 to 3 times more often than code written by hand, which tells you something about where the guardrails need to be. Next, look at how your team's time breaks down between building new things and fixing recent things. Most teams don't track this on purpose, but it tells you everything. If 40% of your sprint is going to unplanned rework, bug fixes on new code, and refactors that weren't on anyone's roadmap, your team is not building. They're cleaning up after themselves. Then look at your code reviews. If review cycles are getting longer and PRs are bouncing back and forth more, that's a quality signal. It means the code showing up in review isn't meeting the team's standards, and your reviewers are picking up the slack. That burns people out. And it hits your most experienced engineers first because they're the ones doing the heavy lifting in review. Last one. When a bug makes it to production, trace it back. Was it generated code? Did the AI introduce a pattern that doesn't fit your architecture? Was there an edge case the tool just didn't think about? That kind of traceability tells you exactly where your process is leaking. Now let's get to the good part. You don't need some big new platform to start doing this. Most teams already have the data sitting right there. Your version control system knows when the files change right after a merge. Your project tracker knows how much unplanned work showed up in each sprint. Your review tools know how long PRs take and how many rounds they go through. The data exists. Someone just needs to connect the dots. So, my challenge to you, pick one metric, and I'd start with rework rate. Measure it for 60 days, compare AI assisted code to everything else. That single number will tell you more about your team's real engineering health than any productivity report you're looking at today. And I want to be real about something. Quality debt is a leadership problem, a systems problem. If your organization is rewarding speed, tracking output volume, and celebrating how fast teams adopted AI tools, you are building the conditions for quality debt to pile up. Your developers will do what the system rewards. And right now, most systems reward shipping fast. So if you're an engineering leader or an architect, your job is to set up workflows where quality is the easy path, the default path. That means putting tools in place that gives developers feedback before code review, not after. It means writing down your quality standards and automating them so they don't just live in a senior engineer's head. It means looking at how you evaluate team performance and making sure things like rework rate, code health, and maintainability actually carry weight alongside velocity. And it means looking at what your best engineers are actually doing all day. If your strongest people are spending their time reviewing AI generated code instead of designing systems and mentoring the next generation of engineers, you've got a misalignment. You're paying senior level salaries for review work that tooling and process should be handling. Think about it this way. When was the last time a promotion conversation included how well someone kept quality high across their team's AI assisted output? When did you last recognize someone for catching a pattern problem before it spread into the code base? If the answer is never, your incentives are telling your team exactly what matters and they're listening. The team that gets this right builds environments where AI makes their best people even better instead of burying them in cleanup work. That's a design choice, and it starts with the leadership. I'll wrap up with this. AI changed what it means to write code. It didn't change what it means to own a code base. The hard parts of building software have always been understanding the problem, making good trade offs, keeping a system healthy over time so your team can confidently build on top of it next month and next year. Those hard parts are still there. AI just made them a lot easier to skip. A function that works today, but nobody understands tomorrow is a liability. A code base that grows faster than your team can reason about it is fragile. And a dashboard that shows velocity going up while quality is quietly going down, that's telling your leadership a story that isn't true. The strongest engineering teams I see are the ones who figured out how to use AI without giving up the practices that make software last. They treated generated output as a starting point. They measure what actually matters. They build systems that catch quality issues early, and they hold the line on engineering standards, even when the pressure says ship faster. The organizations that treat AI as a shortcut are going to pay the rework tax later. The ones that treat it as a tool inside a strong engineering culture are going to build software that holds up. That's the choice sitting in front of every team in this room. Make it on purpose. And if you walk away with just one thing today, make it this: go back to your team next week and look at your rework rate. Look at how much time your best people are spending on cleanup versus new work. Have that hard conversation, because the first step to fixing quality debt is seeing it. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. Thank you.